Picture this: a world beneath the waves, where coral-encrusted stone terraces, massive platforms, and what look like carved staircases descend into the deep blue. Off the remote coast of Yonaguni, Japan, lies one of the most provocative and hotly debated underwater discoveries ever made. For decades, since its chance discovery by a local diver in the 1980s, the Yonaguni Monument has captivated explorers, scientists, and skeptics alike. What you are seeing is not a sunken ship or a modern installation. This is a sprawling, mysterious complex of rock formations so geometrically precise, so unnaturally structured, that it challenges everything we think we know about human history and the power of nature. The central question is as compelling as it is divisive. Are these the breathtaking remains of a sophisticated ancient civilization, swallowed by the sea thousands of years ago, or simply a marvel of natural geology, sculpted by ocean currents and seismic shifts over millennia? This isn't just an academic debate, it's a genuine archaeological thriller playing out on the ocean floor. The Yonaguni structures evoke a powerful sense of wonder and curiosity, drawing us into a story that feels almost mythical. Could there have been an advanced culture, now lost to time, that built these grand terraces and monolithic structures? Imagine the civilization that might have thrived here, a society with the knowledge and skill to shape stone on such a monumental scale, only to vanish beneath the rising seas. The emotional pull is undeniable. It speaks to our deepest fascinations with forgotten worlds and human resilience. Every sharp corner, every seemingly intentional right angle, pulls you deeper into the possibility that we are looking at the footprint of a people history has entirely overlooked. This sense of discovery is not just scientific, it's deeply human, inviting you to become part of the investigation, to look closer and ask your own questions. In this video, we're embarking on a journey to explore every facet of this underwater enigma. We'll dive into the competing theories, examine the geological evidence, and hear from the researchers who have dedicated their lives to solving this mystery. You'll see why the Yonaguni Monument remains one of archaeology's most controversial puzzles, a site that refuses to offer easy answers. We'll navigate the arguments from those who see clear signs of human craftsmanship to those who attribute everything to the patient, chaotic artistry of nature. This is more than just a tour of an underwater site, it's an exploration of human curiosity itself, a quest for truth in the shadowy depths of our planet's past. So prepare to look at the evidence, weigh the possibilities, and decide for yourself what secrets these ancient stones might hold. The story of this underwater marvel begins not in a laboratory or a university, but with a single diver exploring the clear, deep waters off Yonaguni's shore. In the spring of 1986, a local diving tour operator named Kihachiro Aratake was charting new territory. His primary mission was a practical one: to locate promising new spots for his clients to witness the majestic schools of hammerhead sharks that frequent the area. He was navigating his boat near Arakawa Point, an area known for its strong currents and dramatic underwater topography, when something on the seafloor caught his eye. It was far larger and far more geometric than anything he had ever encountered in the ocean. What he initially thought might be a singular, strange rock formation soon revealed itself to be part of something immense. As he swam closer, the sheer scale of the discovery began to dawn on him. He wasn't looking at a random collection of stones, he was floating above an entire landscape of submerged architecture. Directly before him rose a massive, monolithic structure, a towering edifice of stone that seemed to ascend in a series of near-perfect flat terraces. The edges were sharp and clean, forming distinct 90-degree angles that contradicted the usual worn, rounded shapes created by natural erosion. He observed what looked unmistakably like wide, imposing staircases connecting the different levels, each step appearing uniform and deliberate. There were surfaces so flat and smooth they seemed almost polished, and features that resembled carved channels and triangular openings. The entire complex stretched out into the hazy blue distance, a sprawling, silent city sleeping beneath the waves. For Aratake, the initial feeling was a profound mix of awe and utter confusion. He knew the local waters intimately, yet here was something that defied all his experience, a secret the ocean had kept hidden, perhaps for thousands of years. His discovery was accidental, but its impact was immediate and profound. Word of the find spread quickly through the small island community and then beyond, capturing the imagination of the entire world. The initial reports were met with a combination of excitement and deep skepticism. What exactly had this diver stumbled upon? Some of the first experts to hear the descriptions theorized it must be a natural, if incredibly unusual, geological formation. Others, however, felt a growing sense of anticipation, believing that Aratake might have uncovered one of the most significant archaeological finds of the modern era, a potential lost city from a forgotten chapter of human prehistory. This single moment of discovery by a man simply searching for sharks set in motion a decades-long scientific debate that would draw in geologists, archaeologists, historians, and alternative researchers from across the globe, all seeking to answer the fundamental question posed by those first, astonishing glimpses of the Yonaguni Monument. To truly grasp the scale and mystery of this place, we need to situate ourselves in its remote and powerful setting. The monument lies submerged off the southern coast of Yonaguni Island, a tiny, rugged speck of land that marks the westernmost territory of all Japan. This island is part of the Yama archipelago, a chain situated in the expansive East China Sea where the powerful Kuroshio current churns the waters. It is a place of dramatic cliffs, strong ocean swells, and a profound sense of isolation, feeling miles away from the mainland in both distance and atmosphere. Resting on the seafloor at a depth ranging from just 5 meters to about 30 meters, that's roughly 16 to 100 feet. The structure is accessible enough for divers to explore, yet its position in often turbulent waters means it has remained a challenging and exclusive site to study. This isn't a calm, sheltered lagoon. It's an active, dynamic marine environment, which adds another layer of complexity to the mystery of what exactly lies beneath the surface. What divers encounter there is staggering in its proportions. The main structure is colossal, stretching approximately 150 meters in length, 40 meters in width, and rising 27 meters from the seabed. To put that into perspective, its footprint is larger than a professional football field, and its height rivals a modern 8-story building. This isn't a collection of scattered rocks. It is a single, dominant formation that commands the underwater landscape. Its most immediate and striking characteristic is its unmistakable resemblance to a stepped pyramid or a ziggurat, the kind of massive, tiered temple found in ancient Mesopotamia. The entire edifice is defined by a series of immense flat terraces that stack one upon the other, connected by what can only be described as steep, cliff-like vertical drops. As you swim closer, the details become even more compelling and difficult to dismiss as purely natural. The edges of these terraces and platforms are not worn and rounded by the sea, as one might expect. Instead, they are often sharp and precise, forming clean, 90-degree angles that feel deliberate and constructed. Scattered across this monumental canvas are features that seem to defy random geological chance. There are 2 prominent, tall pillars of rock positioned side by side, creating an iconic formation that looks like a giant gateway or entryway. Elsewhere, you can find long, straight sections of stone that run parallel to each other, resembling fortified walls or the foundations of a large building. One of the most debated features is a trench that runs around the base of the main structure, a deep channel that some argue looks like a defensive moat or a processional pathway, artificially cleared to separate the monument from the surrounding bedrock. The overall impression is not of a random, if beautiful, collection of rocks, but of a sprawling, coherent complex. It feels like a ceremonial center, a fortress, or an entire acropolis that was meticulously planned and shaped, a grand architectural vision now silently presiding over its aquatic domain. At the very heart of this underwater complex lies what researchers often call the main terrace, a breathtaking central platform that serves as the undeniable focal point of the entire monument. This is where the argument for human design feels most intense, where the sheer concentration of peculiar features in one location challenges any simple geological explanation. Approaching from the south, divers are first greeted by two colossal, upright pillars of rock standing side by side, a formation that immediately creates a sense of grandeur and intention. They don't appear as broken fragments or random outcroppings. Their parallel alignment and imposing height give the powerful impression of a ceremonial gateway, a threshold meant to mark the transition into a sacred or significant space. Passing between them, you enter the main plaza, a vast, open area defined by its staggering flatness. This isn't a gently sloping or uneven seabed. It is an expansive, level surface that feels deliberately prepared, like the foundation for a great public square or the courtyard of a temple. To the east of this central plaza, a particularly enigmatic feature captures the attention, a deep, perfectly triangular pool carved into the solid rock. The sides of this pool are strikingly straight, meeting at sharp, precise angles that nature rarely, if ever, produces through random erosion. Its form is so geometric, so deliberate, that it's difficult to see it as anything other than an artificial basin. Speculation about its purpose runs wild. Was it a reservoir for holding fresh water, a reflecting pool for religious rituals, or perhaps even part of a sophisticated aquaculture system? The mystery deepens when you follow what appears to be a wide, cleared pathway that loops around the entire base of the main terrace. This so-called loop road is another feature that stands out dramatically from the surrounding jumble of natural bedrock. It's a smooth, navigable route that seems to intentionally encircle the central structure, suggesting it could have been a processional way for ceremonies or simply a main thoroughfare for people moving through the complex. Perhaps one of the most geometrically compelling elements is found on the upper tier of the monument, a distinct star-shaped platform. This is not a vague, suggestive shape. It is a clear, five-pointed form etched into the stone, with straight lines radiating from a central point. In a natural sandstone formation, subjected to millennia of tidal forces and random erosion, such a symmetrical and complex pattern is virtually unheard of. Its presence strongly implies a symbolic or functional purpose, perhaps a designated spot for an altar, a marker for astronomical observations, or a seat of authority. When you step back and view the entire layout, the gateway pillars, the central plaza, the triangular pool, the encircling road, and the star-shaped platform, they don't feel like a random assortment of odd rocks. Instead, they appear interconnected, arranged with a sense of purpose that strongly suggests this was a designed environment, a carefully planned communal space built for gathering, ceremony, and shared social activity. The most persistent and visually persuasive evidence for this design, however, lies in the stonework itself. The entire structure is composed of a relatively soft sandstone, a material that typically weathers in rounded, irregular shapes when exposed to water and currents. Yet, throughout the main terrace, you find an overwhelming abundance of sharp, 90-degree angles and long, unwaveringly straight lines. There are vertical rock faces that drop precipitously to meet perfectly flat horizontal surfaces, creating clean, crisp corners that look as if they were cut with tools. You can trace straight edges that run for several meters without a single curve or break. This kind of geometric precision is the hallmark of human masonry. While nature can create flat surfaces and even occasional angles through the process of jointing where rock naturally fractures along its planes, The sheer density, consistency, and orchestration of these perfect angles and lines across a single, coherent structure pushes far beyond what standard geological models can comfortably explain. It is this pervasive, unnatural geometry that forms the core of the argument, making the Yonaguni Monument not just a beautiful underwater landscape, but a profound archaeological puzzle waiting to be solved. Amidst the grand architectural forms of the main terrace, one smaller feature has captured the public imagination more than any other, serving as a powerful symbol for those who believe the monument is man-made. Resting on the southern platform is a massive triangular block of stone that bears an uncanny and detailed resemblance to a giant turtle. This is not a vaguely suggestive shape. From a certain angle, the rock clearly forms a defined head with what looks like a carved eye, a pronounced beak, and a sprawling, broad shell. The most arresting detail is the pattern on this shell, a series of raised, intersecting lines that create a distinct, diamond-shaped mosaic across its surface, a pattern that echoes artistic depictions of turtles found in ancient cultures across Asia. For proponents of the artificial origin theory, this isn't just a curious rock. It's a masterfully carved sculpture, a zoomorphic representation that would have held significant cultural and possibly religious meaning for its creators, perhaps symbolizing longevity or a connection to the spiritual world. The human tendency to see familiar shapes in random patterns, a psychological phenomenon known as pareidolia, is the central counter-argument here. We are hardwired to find faces in clouds and animals in rock formations. Skeptics argue that the turtle is a classic example of this, a compelling but entirely natural coincidence shaped by centuries of erosion along the stone's inherent fracture lines. They point out that the sandstone in this region is cross-bedded, meaning it formed in sloping layers, and that the intersecting fractures could naturally create angular, geometric patterns that our brains readily assemble into a recognizable animal form. The head and beak, they suggest, could simply be a piece of rock that broke off along a fault line, its current position purely a matter of chance. The debate ultimately hinges on intentionality. Is the intricate, symmetrical pattern on the shell the result of a conscious artistic decision? Or is it a perfect storm of natural geological processes that happens to align with a symbol deeply embedded in human culture? Beyond the turtle, other potential carvings fuel the controversy. On a massive vertical wall, some researchers have pointed to a series of grooves and protrusions that they interpret as a stylized human face, perhaps even resembling the iconic Moai statues of Easter Island. This face appears to have a heavy brow line, a prominent nose, and a set jaw, features that seem too clustered and structured to be entirely random. Another formation, located away from the main structure, consists of a large, isolated rectangular block with a peculiar, rounded top and a distinct indentation, leading some to call it a throne or an altar. The arguments surrounding these features follow a similar pattern. Those who see human hands at work emphasize the placement, the combination of features, and the way these forms stand out from the undifferentiated bedrock around them. They argue that while pareidolia is a real factor, it doesn't adequately explain the concentration of multiple, complex, and culturally resonant shapes within a single, coherent site. Geologists responding to these claims urge a cautious methodology. They explain that underwater environments are incredibly dynamic, with tidal currents, burrowing organisms, and chemical weathering constantly reshaping the rock. A feature that looks like a carved eye today might have been a small pitting that was enlarged over centuries by a species of mollusk. A straight line that appears chiseled could be the result of a harder layer of rock eroding more slowly than the softer material around it. The fundamental question they pose is this: where is the unambiguous, undeniable evidence of tool marks? For a site to be definitively proven as artificial, archaeologists would expect to find clear signs of quarrying, like consistent chisel strikes, drilling holes, or transport pathways, evidence that has so far remained elusive at Yonaguni. The absence of such classic markers forces us to rely on interpreting the shapes themselves, a process that is inherently subjective and deeply influenced by what we hope or expect to find. This ongoing dialogue between the compelling power of perceived form and the rigorous demands of geological science lies at the very core of the Yonaguni enigma, challenging us to distinguish between what we see and what we want to see. Even as we marvel at the intricate shapes of turtles and faces, there is one feature at Yonaguni that commands attention with its sheer, undeniable presence: the main staircase. This is not a subtle or ambiguous formation. Ascending one side of the primary terrace is a series of massive stone steps, each one appearing to be carved with a startling uniformity in both height and depth. The steps rise sequentially, leading the eye, and in one's imagination, the foot directly up to the central platform that forms the heart of the complex. For anyone viewing it for the first time, the impression is immediate and powerful. This looks exactly like a grand ceremonial staircase, the kind that would lead worshippers or dignitaries to a sacred space high above the common ground. The visual impact is so strong that it's difficult to dismiss it as a mere trick of the light or a curious arrangement of rocks. This staircase stands as one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for those who argue that human hands were at work here. The case for its artificiality rests heavily on its regularity. In nature, erosion is a chaotic process. Water, wind, and seismic activity wear away at stone in unpredictable patterns, creating surfaces that are typically uneven, pitted, and irregular. What we see at Yonaguni's main staircase defies this expectation. The steps exhibit a remarkable consistency in their dimensions. While not machined to perfection, the treads, the flat, horizontal parts you step on, and the risers, the vertical faces between steps, maintain a surprising degree of uniformity across the entire flight. This repetitive pattern of similar-sized blocks, stacked in such an organized, ascending manner, is precisely the kind of ordered geometry that human intelligence imposes on construction. It suggests a design principle, a conscious effort to create a functional and imposing ascent. The staircase doesn't just look like steps, it functions logically as a staircase, providing a clear and navigable route from a lower level to a higher, more significant plane, reinforcing the idea that this entire complex was laid out with intention and purpose. Of course, geology offers its own explanations, and they are equally fascinating. The entire monument is composed of sandstone, a sedimentary rock that is particularly susceptible to a process known as jointing. As rock formations cool, dry, or are placed under tectonic stress, they develop natural weak points or joints, which are essentially straight cracks that run through the stone. At Yonaguni, the dominant joints run both horizontally and vertically, creating a natural grid-like pattern within the bedrock. Over thousands of years, the powerful ocean currents surging through the region would have preferentially eroded the softer rock along these pre-existing vertical joints. Think of it like the ocean patiently using its natural saws, sand, and pebbles carried by the water to cut along the lines of weakness. This process, known as differential erosion, could theoretically pluck out rectangular blocks of stone, one after another, leaving behind a series of step-like formations. In this view, the staircase is not built, but uncovered a natural sculpture revealed by the patient work of the sea. So, where does the truth lie? It resides in the subtle but critical details that distinguish random chance from deliberate action. While jointing can create stepped formations, the resulting features are often less regular and more haphazard than what we observe at Yonaguni. Natural erosion tends to produce steps that vary greatly in size, with uneven heights, depths, and angles. The Yonaguni staircase, by contrast, shows a level of consistency that pushes against the limits of what geology typically produces. Furthermore, the staircase is not an isolated anomaly. It is integrated into the larger architecture of the site, aligning perfectly with the central platform and other seemingly planned features like the terraces and the loop road. This contextual relationship is crucial. A single, strange formation might be written off as a geological fluke, but a staircase that logically connects two major elements of a larger, coherent layout strongly implies a unifying design. The very presence of this grand ascent forces us to confront the possibility that we are not just looking at a random act of nature, but at the remains of a built environment, a place where people once climbed purposefully toward the sky. Enter Professor Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist from the University of the Ryukyus who would become the monument's most dedicated and vocal champion. For more than 2 decades, Kimura has led hundreds of dives to the site, mapping its features with meticulous detail and building a comprehensive argument that has become the cornerstone of the man-made theory. As a scientist trained in understanding how the Earth shapes itself beneath the waves, his initial expectations were likely rooted in geology. Yet, the more time he spent among those submerged terraces, the more convinced he became that he was not just studying a curious rock formation, but actively unraveling the secrets of a lost civilization. His academic background lends a powerful credibility to his claims, transforming the discussion from fringe speculation into a serious, scientifically backed controversy. Kimura's core argument is that the monument is far too complex and coherent to be a product of random natural forces. He doesn't just see a collection of oddly shaped rocks. He interprets a vast, intelligently designed complex, possibly a religious citadel, a bustling port city, or even a grand ceremonial center for a culture that has since vanished from history. He points to the sheer orchestration of the site's features as undeniable proof of planning. The main terrace, with its level plaza and surrounding structures, functions as a central square. The wide, encircling pathway acts as a main artery connecting different districts. The grand staircase provides a ceremonial ascent. In Kimura's view, these aren't isolated geological accidents. They are integrated components of a single, sprawling urban or religious landscape, all working in concert. He has even theorized that the entire structure might have served a practical purpose as a kind of ancient navigation aid or a monumental fortress. Its towering form a visible landmark for ancient mariners navigating the treacherous waters of the East China Sea. To support this grand vision, Professor Kimura and his team point to specific, tangible evidence that they believe can only be explained by human intervention. One of his most significant claims is the discovery of what he identifies as ancient quarries located near the main monument. These are areas where large, rectangular blocks of stone appear to have been cleanly extracted from the bedrock, leaving behind clear negative spaces that match the missing blocks in size and shape. The presence of these quarries suggests an active construction site, a place where raw material was being systematically harvested to build or expand the complex. Furthermore, Kimura claims to have identified actual tool marks on some of the stone surfaces. These are described as consistent, repetitive grooves and striations that do not follow the natural grain of the sandstone, implying the use of metal or stone tools to shape and dress the rock. This kind of evidence is exactly what mainstream archaeologists often request: direct physical proof of human modification. Perhaps one of his most provocative assertions extends the mystery beyond the main site. Kimura reports the existence of a second, distinct structure located near the primary monument, which he describes as a castle. This formation, he argues, features even more dramatic architectural elements, including arched gateways and walls that stand at perfect right angles, further compounding the idea of a widespread, sophisticated building culture in the area. He has also pointed to what he interprets as carved characters or symbols on some of the stones, though these remain highly debated and have not been widely verified by other researchers. For Kimura, all of this evidence paints a compelling and holistic picture. He envisions a vast, submerged cultural landscape, a testament to a sophisticated society that thrived on the Yonaguni coast thousands of years ago, before a catastrophic seismic event common in this tectonically volatile region caused the land to sink beneath the waves, preserving its secrets in the silent depths. Yet for every compelling argument in favor of a lost civilization, there exists an equally powerful scientific counterargument. Enter Professor Robert Schoch, a geologist from Boston University, whose expertise lies in analyzing how natural forces sculpt rock over immense periods. When Schoch first examined the Yonaguni Monument, he approached it not as a potential archaeologist might, but with the trained eye of a geologist. His conclusion, after extensive study, stands in stark opposition to the theories of Professor Kimura. Schoch asserts that the monument is a spectacular but entirely natural formation. He attributes its bewilderingly geometric appearance to a combination of the rock's inherent properties and the relentless, patient work of the ocean. Schoch's entire case rests on understanding the fundamental nature of the stone itself. The monument is composed of a relatively soft sedimentary rock known as sandstone, which was originally deposited in horizontal layers millions of years ago. This specific sandstone is cross-bedded, meaning it formed in sloping layers, and is crisscrossed with a dense network of natural vertical and horizontal fractures or joints. These joints are not signs of damage, they are inherent planes of weakness within the rock mass, much like the natural grain in a piece of wood. Schoch argues that these joints are the primary blueprint for the entire structure. They create a natural grid system within the bedrock, predetermining how the rock will break and erode over time. When you look at the monument's sharp angles and flat surfaces, Schoch suggests, you are essentially looking at the exposed faces of these giant, naturally defined blocks. The primary artist chiseling away at this rocky blueprint, according to Schoch, is the ocean itself. The waters off Yonaguni are anything still. They are churned by powerful currents, including the immense Kuroshio current, and battered by typhoons. This dynamic marine environment acts as a continuous, powerful sandblaster. Over thousands of years, sand, pebbles, and other sediments carried by these currents have relentlessly abraded the sandstone. This process, known as differential erosion, works by selectively wearing away the softer rock. The ocean's abrasive action is most effective along the pre-existing joints and the weaker, more porous layers of sandstone. Imagine the ocean as a master sculptor who doesn't carve randomly, but instead follows the invisible lines drawn by nature, carefully freeing the rectangular blocks defined by the jointing system. This, Schoch explains, is how you can get astonishingly flat surfaces and nearly perfect right angles without a single human tool. The terraces are simply the more resistant horizontal layers of rock, while the vertical drops are the faces created when weaker layers between them were completely eroded away. One of Schoch's most critical observations addresses the very composition of the site. He points out that the monument is not an isolated, freestanding structure placed upon the seabed. It is fundamentally part of the same bedrock that makes up the entire coastline of Yonaguni Island. There is no clear separation between the so-called monument and the surrounding underwater rock formations. It is all one continuous geological unit. If this were a built city, you would expect to find clear distinctions: foundations set into the seabed, construction debris, or quarried stones that were transported from another location. At Yonaguni, the structure emerges directly from the living rock of the island itself. The grand staircase in this geological view is a perfect example of this process. The steps are not individual blocks that were cut and placed. They are the result of the ocean exploiting a series of closely spaced vertical joints, systematically plucking out piece after piece of the weaker rock, leaving behind a strikingly regular, stair-like sequence of the more durable layers. It is nature's masonry, executed on a breathtaking scale over millennia, creating an illusion of design so persuasive that it captivates all who see it. This brings us to a pivotal and inescapable question that lies at the very core of the Yonaguni mystery. If humans did build this, when could they have possibly done it? To answer that, we must turn our gaze away from the stone itself and toward the water that now conceals it, because the history of the ocean holds the only key to the monument's possible age. The simple, undeniable fact is that the Yonaguni structure is now submerged under meters of seawater. For it to have been built and used by people, it must have been constructed on dry land. This single reality forces us to confront a timeline that dramatically challenges conventional understandings of human civilization. The story of our planet's sea levels is one of dramatic flux, driven primarily by the great ice ages. During the peak of the last glacial period, around 20,000 years ago, colossal volumes of the world's water were locked up in vast continental ice sheets that covered much of North America, Northern Europe, and Asia. So much water was trapped in this frozen state that global sea levels were a staggering 120 meters, about 400 feet lower than they are today. On a map, this transformation would be breathtaking. Entire continental shelves were exposed, creating vast, habitable coastal plains that are now lost beneath the waves. Japan was not a scattered archipelago of islands as we know it now, but was connected by land bridges to the Asian mainland. Crucially, the area around Yonaguni Island was not underwater. The East China Sea was a fraction of its current size, and the monument's location would have been on dry ground, possibly on a high cliff overlooking a verdant, extended coastal plain. The end of this ice age triggered a global cataclysm of rising water. As the world's climate warmed, beginning around 14,000 years ago, the massive ice sheets began their relentless retreat, melting and calving into the oceans. This was not a gentle, gradual process, but a series of rapid pulses and surges that geologists call meltwater pulses. One of the most significant, known as Meltwater Pulse 1A, occurred around 14,000 years ago and saw sea levels rise globally by as much as 20 meters, over 60 feet in just a few centuries. This was a transformative event on a scale almost impossible for us to comprehend today. Coastlines worldwide would have been visibly and rapidly swallowed, forcing human populations to abandon their settlements and migrate inland, generation after generation. Now, let's apply this geological timeline to the Yonaguni Monument. The structure currently sits at depths ranging from 5 to 30 meters. For it to have been built and used as a terrestrial site, it must have been constructed when the local sea level was at least 30 meters lower than it is now. According to the established sea level curves for this region, that condition was last met between approximately 10,000 and, at the very latest, 8,000 years ago. This is the uncompromising chronological window we are given. If the monument is artificial, its construction must have been completed by at least 8,000 years ago. This immediately places any potential builders in the prehistoric era known as the Jomon period in Japan, a time traditionally viewed as a culture of hunter-gatherers who lived in pit dwellings and created sophisticated pottery, but not known for constructing massive, ceremonial stone architecture on this scale. This timeline is the primary reason why the Yonaguni Monument is so deeply controversial. Accepting it as a man-made structure doesn't just mean re-evaluating a single underwater site. It forces a radical reconsideration of the entire narrative of human technological and social development. Mainstream archaeology tells us that the first large-scale, complex societies, with the organized labor and engineering knowledge required for such monumental construction, emerged in Mesopotamia and Egypt around 5,000 years ago. The pyramids of Giza, for instance, were built around 4,500 years ago. The Yonaguni Monument, by the unforgiving logic of sea level science, could be more than twice that age. It would suggest that a culture capable of such ambitious stonework existed in the remote islands of Japan millennia before the rise of the pharaohs, a civilization that has left no clear trace in the accepted archaeological record beyond this one breathtaking underwater anomaly. Of course, this entire argument rests on a critical assumption that the monument was built at or near sea level, Could an ancient civilization have constructed it underwater? While this idea appears in more speculative theories, it is dismissed by virtually all serious researchers. The logistics of quarrying, shaping, and placing multi-ton stone blocks in the strong, deep currents of the East China Sea, using only prehistoric technology, are beyond comprehension. The most plausible scenario, if the site is artificial, is that it was built on land and subsequently flooded. This makes the sea level history not just a piece of context, but the ultimate arbiter of the site's potential significance. It presents us with a stark choice. Either we are looking at a spectacular natural wonder, or we are looking at the ruins of a civilization so ancient that its very existence would rewrite the history books, pushing back the dawn of monumental architecture by thousands of years and revealing a lost chapter of human achievement now submerged beneath the waves. Standing before the Yonaguni Monument, one cannot help but feel a powerful sense of déjà vu, a recognition that this submerged structure echoes architectural forms from across the ancient world. When you place images of Yonaguni's terraced platforms and grand staircases alongside the great ziggurats of ancient Mesopotamia, the resemblance is startling. Consider the famous ziggurat of Ur, a massive, stepped pyramid constructed to elevate a temple closer to the heavens. Both structures employ a series of ascending, flat terraces connected by central staircases, creating a monumental profile meant to dominate the landscape. This design principle is not merely aesthetic, it is deeply symbolic, representing a connection between the earthly and the divine, a man-made mountain reaching for the gods. The builders of these structures, separated by potentially thousands of years and a vast expanse of ocean, seemingly arrived at a remarkably similar architectural solution for their most sacred spaces. This parallel suggests that the impulse to build upwards to create a focal point for community and worship might be a fundamental thread in the fabric of human civilization, whether it emerged in the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East or on the rocky coast of a prehistoric Japan. The comparisons extend far beyond Mesopotamia. Look at the first pyramids of Egypt, like the step pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara, which predates the smooth-sided pyramids of Giza. This proto-pyramid is essentially a series of mastabas or flat-topped tombs, stacked upon one another to create a towering, tiered structure. The visual and functional similarity to Yonaguni's main terrace is profound. Both feature a core of stacked platforms, creating a sense of ascending order and imposing scale. Even in the Americas, the template repeats itself. The temple complexes of Latin America, such as the Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan in Mexico or the ancient structures at Caral in Peru, are built upon massive, terraced bases with monumental staircases providing access to the summit. These global similarities point to a powerful and recurring idea that the most significant communal buildings, whether for ceremony, governance, or astronomy, were often constructed as elevated terraced pyramids. The widespread use of this form could indicate a shared, intuitive understanding of power, perspective, and sacred geometry among ancient peoples. If Yonaguni is indeed man-made, it would represent the earliest known example of this universal architectural archetype, a blueprint for sacred space that would later be replicated across the globe. But these parallels inevitably lead to a much more contentious and thrilling question. If these designs are so similar, could there have been a direct cultural connection? Could ancient mariners have traversed the vast Pacific, carrying architectural ideas from one continent to another? The conventional historical narrative places the development of these great civilizations in isolated silos, each inventing pyramid-like structures independently. However, the existence of a potential 10,000-year-old complex like Yonaguni challenges this isolationist view. It forces us to consider the possibility of a prehistoric seafaring network, a web of cultural exchange that linked distant shores long before recorded history. The Kuroshio Current, which flows powerfully past Yonaguni, acts like a natural conveyor belt, a maritime highway that could have carried vessels from the coast of Japan across to the Americas. This isn't just wild speculation. There is growing evidence from genetic studies of ancient populations to the spread of specific plant species that suggests transoceanic contact was not only possible but probable at various points in deep prehistory. Imagine a scenario where the knowledge of monumental construction was not independently invented in 5 separate locations, but was instead a technology that spread. A sophisticated culture, perhaps based in a now submerged continental shelf, like the vast landmass known as Sunderland or the coastal plains of ancient East Asia, could have developed this architectural style. As sea levels rose catastrophically at the end of the last ice age, this culture's people would have been displaced, becoming maritime refugees who carried their knowledge with them as they migrated. Some groups might have traveled west, influencing the emerging cultures of Mesopotamia and Egypt. Others, riding the Kuroshio current, could have made landfall in the Americas, seeding the architectural traditions that would later blossom into the great pyramids and temples of the Inca, the Maya, and the Aztec. In this radical reinterpretation, Yonaguni would not be an isolated anomaly but a crucial waypoint, a surviving piece of a global puzzle, a mother culture whose ruins now lie mostly beneath the sea. Of course, the opposing view holds that these similarities are a classic case of convergent cultural evolution. This principle suggests that different societies, when faced with similar human needs and technological constraints, will often arrive at similar solutions independently. The pyramid form is, from an engineering perspective, an incredibly stable and logical way to build tall, impressive structures with primitive tools. A pile of stones naturally settles into a pyramidal shape. It is the most fundamental and sturdy form of large-scale construction. A staircase is the most practical method for ascending a tall platform. A flat terrace provides a stable foundation for a temple or a chief's residence. Therefore, it is entirely plausible that cultures across the world, seeking to build their most important communal buildings, independently discovered the strength and symbolism of the terraced pyramid. They were all solving the same basic problem: how to build monumentally, and they all converged on the same elegant, robust answer. From this perspective, Yonaguni resemblance to other ancient sites is a fascinating example of this universal human ingenuity, not proof of a lost global civilization, but a testament to the shared creative spirit of humanity as we emerged from the Ice Age. Winding its way around the base of the main terrace is another feature that profoundly deepens the mystery, a long, straight pathway that researchers have come to call the Loop Road. This isn't a narrow, meandering trail, but a wide, cleared avenue that appears to deliberately encircle the heart of the complex. The surface of this path is notably different from the surrounding rugged seabed. It's comparatively smooth and level, as if it were intentionally cleared of obstructions to allow for easy passage. When you observe it from above, its course seems purposeful, connecting the lower areas of the site directly to the grand staircase and the central plaza. For those who see a planned settlement here, this loop road is a classic feature of urban infrastructure. It functions exactly like a main thoroughfare in any ancient city, a paved or processional way designed to guide people and perhaps even ceremonial processions around the most important civic and religious structures. It suggests a sophisticated understanding of traffic flow and public space, reinforcing the idea that this entire complex was designed as a cohesive, functional environment, not just a collection of random monuments. Adding further weight to this interpretation are the curious channels that cut through the rock in various locations. Some of these are narrow, trench-like features that run along the edges of terraces or beside the loop road itself. Others appear as deeper, more pronounced grooves. To an observer looking for signs of human habitation, their purpose seems immediately clear: drainage. Any settlement, especially one built with large, flat stone surfaces, requires an effective system to manage rainwater and prevent flooding. these channels look precisely like the kind of infrastructure an ancient engineer would design to direct water away from walkways and plazas, channeling it off the sides of the terraces and down into the surrounding ground. This attention to practical utility speaks volumes. It moves beyond the purely ceremonial and into the realm of everyday community living, hinting at a population that needed to solve mundane but critical problems like stormwater management, a challenge familiar to builders of ancient cities from Machu Picchu to Mohenjo-Daro. The geological perspective, however, offers a very different and equally compelling origin story for these same features. Geologists point out that the entire Yonaguni Formation is a masterpiece of natural jointing and erosion. The loop road, in their view, is likely a textbook example of a feature created by the ocean exploiting a major linear joint or fault line within the bedrock. Over thousands of years, the relentless scouring action of sand and currents would have preferentially worn away the softer rock along this pre-existing plane of weakness, effectively excavating a long, straight, and level pathway. It's a process not of construction but of subtraction. The ocean didn't build the road, it simply cleared one away, following the hidden blueprint written in the stone itself. The apparent smoothness of its surface is not the result of paving or leveling, but of consistent, uniform erosion across a single, homogeneous layer of sandstone. Similarly, the drainage channels find a ready explanation in the same geological toolbox. What look like carefully carved conduits can easily be the result of two perfectly natural phenomena. First, smaller, secondary joints running through the rock could have provided the initial fracture lines. As water, both from rainfall when the site was above water and from tidal currents after its submersion, flowed across the stone, it would have naturally sought out these weaknesses, gradually widening them into the grooves we see today. Second, a process known as bioweathering likely played a significant role. Mollusks, worms, and other marine organisms often bore into softer rock to create homes or seek nutrients. Their collective activity can etch and deepen small fissures over centuries, creating channel-like features that appear intentional but are, in fact, the accumulated work of countless tiny creatures. From this viewpoint, the entire site is a dynamic landscape, still being actively shaped by the trifecta of tectonic forces, hydraulic sandblasting, and biological action. The debate over these features ultimately hinges on the concept of parsimony, or Occam's razor, the idea that the simplest explanation with the fewest assumptions is usually the best. The geological argument is powerful in its elegance. A single, consistent process of differential erosion along natural joint systems can account for the terraces, the right angles, the staircase, the loop road, and the channels without needing to invoke an unknown, advanced prehistoric civilization. It presents a unified theory that fits within our established understanding of how sandstone behaves in a high-energy marine environment. The archaeological theory, by contrast, requires us to accept a far more complex proposition, that a culture for which we have no other conclusive evidence possessed the sophisticated engineering knowledge to plan an entire urban infrastructure, complete with processional roads and drainage systems, at a time when humanity was supposedly only just discovering agriculture. The loop road and its accompanying channels stand at the very crossroads of this intellectual conflict, their smooth, purposeful lines silently challenging us to decide whether we are looking at the ghost of a city or the magnificent, unplanned artistry of the planet itself. Yet the debate over these grand architectural forms ultimately comes down to the smallest of details, the microscopic evidence etched into the stone itself. The search for definitive proof of human craftsmanship at Yonaguni hinges on one critical piece of physical evidence, tool marks. Professor Kimura and his team insist they have found them. On specific surfaces, particularly around the areas he identifies as quarries and on the faces of some of the perfectly angled walls, he points to a series of consistent parallel grooves and striations. These are not the chaotic, intersecting scratches of random erosion. They are organized, repetitive lines that he argues bear the unmistakable signature of a pointed tool being struck repeatedly against the rock, most likely a metal chisel. The presence of such marks would be a game changer, providing the kind of direct, undeniable evidence of human modification that the larger forms, compelling as they are, cannot offer on their own. Kimura's argument gains further traction from his analysis of the so-called quarries. These are sections of bedrock adjacent to the main monument where large, geometrically shaped blocks appear to have been removed. The empty spaces left behind are clean and sharp-edged, and it is on the vertical faces of these negatives that his team claims to see the most convincing tool marks. They describe a pattern where the grooves often cluster in specific areas, suggesting a concentrated effort to split the stone along a desired line, much like a modern quarry worker would use a series of drill holes to control a fracture. For Kimura, this combination of extracted blocks and the associated surface markings creates a powerful, interlocking case for human activity. It paints a picture of an active, organized construction site where workers systematically harvested stone and then shaped it with tools, leaving behind their distinctive calling cards in the very material they were working. Skeptics, however, urge extreme caution and offer a suite of entirely natural explanations for these very same features. The primary sculptor, they argue, is not a human hand with a chisel, but the immense, patient power of the ocean. In the dynamic waters off Yonaguni, the seabed is a constantly shifting landscape of sand and gravel, driven by powerful tidal currents. When these abrasive particles are pushed repeatedly across a sandstone surface over millennia, they act like countless tiny, natural chisels, scouring the rock and leaving behind sets of parallel striations. This process, known as current scour, can produce remarkably consistent linear marks that are virtually identical to what one might expect from human tooling. The direction and pattern of these lines would simply follow the dominant flow of the water, creating an illusion of intentional work. Furthermore, the underwater environment is teeming with life that actively modifies its rocky substrate. A wide variety of marine organisms are expert bioeroders. Mollusks like chitons and certain species of clams use their rasp like radulae to scrape algae from the stone, inadvertently carving shallow, linear grooves over generations. Other creatures, such as date mussels and sponges, bore directly into the softer layers of the sandstone to create protective holes and burrows. The collective, relentless activity of this entire ecosystem can dramatically alter a rock's surface, etching complex patterns of pits and channels that can be easily misinterpreted as man-made. What looks like a deliberate chisel mark to an archaeologist might in fact be the cumulative scar of 1,000 mollusks feeding over a century. The final and perhaps most decisive natural argument returns to the fundamental geology of the site. Sandstone is not a homogeneous material. It is a composite of sand grains cemented together, and it possesses natural planes of weakness. When subjected to tectonic stress or even the simple weight of overlying rock, it fractures in a process known as conchoidal fracturing. This can produce sharp, clean edges and surfaces that appear flaked or chipped, similar to the way flint naps when struck. The parallel lines Kimura identifies as tool marks could very well be the result of the rock shearing naturally along its own internal grain, a process that requires no human intervention whatsoever. The quarry blocks in this view are not extracted but simply separated from the main mass as the ocean exploited these natural fractures, prying them loose and carrying them away. Without finding an actual physical artifact, a discarded stone maul or a broken metal chisel lying in situ among these marks, the geological explanations remain powerfully persuasive, reminding us that nature is the most prolific and creative stoneworker of all. Moving beyond the main terrace, another striking feature emerges from the depths, one that captures the imagination with its doorway-like presence. A massive, rectangular opening often referred to as the submerged arch or gate. This is not a small crevice or a rough-hewn hole. It is a grand, geometrically precise aperture that cuts cleanly through a thick section of rock, creating a tunnel-like passage that divers can easily swim through. Its dimensions are substantial, large enough to accommodate several people side by side, and its shape is what truly stops you in your tracks. The top of the opening is a long, perfectly horizontal lintel, while the two sides drop down in straight, parallel vertical lines to meet the seabed, forming a near-perfect rectangle. This clean, 90-degree cornered profile stands in stark contrast to the arched, irregular openings typically created by natural rock collapses or erosion. Its placement within the complex feels deliberate, positioned in a way that suggests it could have served as a formal entrance, a ceremonial gateway marking the transition into a more sacred or restricted section of the site, or perhaps a carefully aligned portal framing a specific view of the ceremonial center. For those who see the hand of human architects at work, this gate is a masterpiece of stoneworking. The precision of its shape is the central argument. Natural erosion, driven by random forces, tends to create rounded, asymmetrical, and irregular openings. It is incredibly rare, if not unheard of, for such processes to produce a sharp-edged, rectangular tunnel with such consistent parallelism and right angles. The clean lines and flat surfaces of the interior walls suggest a deliberate effort to shape and dress the stone, to refine a natural opening into a formal architectural element. Proponents of this view often point to similar ceremonial gateways found in megalithic cultures around the world, from the trilithon at stone, henge to the massive doorways of Inca sites like Ollantaytambo. These structures were never merely functional, they were symbolic, designed to impress and to demarcate a threshold between the mundane and the profound. The Yonaguni Arch in this context fits a known pattern of ancient monumental design, appearing less like a random geological accident and more like a planned, meaningful component of the overall layout, an integral piece of the site's architectural vocabulary. Geologists, however, offer a different and equally compelling origin story, one rooted in the fundamental properties of the sandstone itself. Their explanation begins with the same principle that accounts for the terraces and the staircase, natural jointing. The rock at Yonaguni is crisscrossed with a dense network of vertical and horizontal fractures. The arch they propose is a classic example of what happens when a large, rectangular block of stone defined by these surrounding joints becomes completely dislodged and falls away. Imagine a giant, naturally formed stone cube sitting within the bedrock, its sides already predefined by weakness planes. Over thousands of years, the relentless pounding of waves and the subtle but constant tectonic activity in this seismically volatile region could have provided the final jolt needed to pop this pre-formed block out of its socket, like a piece being removed from a three-dimensional puzzle. The clean, geometric hole left behind would simply be the negative space of that missing block, a perfect imprint of the natural fractures that once held it in place. The ongoing debate is further fueled by the arch's interaction with its marine environment. Skeptics point out that the strong currents flowing through the passage would have continuously scoured and smoothed the interior surfaces, potentially sharpening the edges and enhancing the appearance of artificiality over time. They argue that what we perceive as clean lines is simply the result of efficient, uniform erosion along the pre-existing joint planes, a process that requires no human intervention. Furthermore, the absence of any clear tool marks on the interior faces of the arch remains a significant hurdle for the man-made theory. If this was a constructed gateway, one would expect to find some evidence of the quarrying and shaping process on the stone itself, yet such definitive proof has not been conclusively documented. The arch, therefore, stands as a perfect microcosm of the entire Yonaguni enigma, a feature of breathtaking, almost unbelievable geometry that can be explained through two entirely different lenses. One sees the conscious design of a lost culture, while the other sees the magnificent, serendipitous artistry of the earth. leaving us to ponder whether we are looking at a sacred gateway to the past or simply one of nature's most persuasive illusions. Looking beyond the physical structures, some researchers have proposed that the Yonaguni Monument might have been more than just a city or a fortress. It could have been a sacred observatory, a place where ancient people tracked the heavens and aligned their rituals with the cosmos. The idea centers on the orientation of the monument's most prominent features. The main terrace, with its long, flat surfaces and sharp corners, isn't randomly positioned. Specific edges and walls appear to be aligned along cardinal directions north, south, east, and west with a precision that feels deliberate. This kind of foundational orientation is a hallmark of sacred architecture worldwide, from the pyramids of Giza to the temples of Angkor Wat, suggesting that the builders, if they existed, may have been deeply attuned to the fundamental directions of the earth itself. The celestial connections become even more intriguing when we consider specific solar events. Certain researchers, including Professor Kimura, have noted that key architectural lines within the complex seem to point directly toward the spot on the horizon where the sun rises during the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. On this pivotal day, the first rays of the sun would have illuminated the main staircase or flooded across the central plaza in a specific, dramatic way, perhaps marking the beginning of a new agricultural cycle or a time for important communal ceremonies. Another compelling observation involves a large, isolated stone that some have dubbed the sundial rock. This feature, with its distinct angles and flat surfaces, is positioned in such a way that its shadow would fall along a particular crack or marker on the solstice, creating a natural timekeeping device. While these alignments are not as precisely documented as at more recent sites like Stonehenge, their potential presence at Yonaguni hints at a sophisticated understanding of the solar calendar, an intellectual achievement we don't typically attribute to the hunter-gatherer cultures believed to inhabit this region over 8,000 years ago. This astronomical function would seamlessly integrate with the theory that the monument was a grand ritual center. Imagine this place not as a silent city of stone, but as a vibrant, living heart of a community. The wide, level terraces could have served as stages for public ceremonies, where people gathered to witness rituals performed by spiritual leaders. The grand staircase would have provided a dramatic processional route for priests or chieftains ascending to the elevated platform, making them visible to the entire community below. The star-shaped platform on the upper tier could have been an altar for offerings or a focal point for shamanic journeys, its unique shape symbolizing a connection to the celestial realm. The entire layout, with its open plazas, confined pathways, and towering structures, is perfectly suited for orchestrating large-scale social and religious events, designed to inspire awe and reinforce the cultural and spiritual bonds that held the society together. When we place Yonaguni alongside other renowned ancient sites, the parallels in purpose are striking. Consider Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, a site that also dramatically upended historical timelines. Dating back nearly 12,000 years, it consists of massive, T-shaped stone pillars arranged in circles, covered in intricate animal carvings. Like Yonaguni, it was built by a pre-agricultural society, and its primary function appears to have been ceremonial and astronomical, with certain pillars aligned to significant stars. Both sites suggest that the impulse to build monumentally, to create massive communal projects for spiritual and celestial purposes, may have predated the development of settled farming, turning our traditional understanding of cultural evolution on its head. The connection extends across the ocean to the ancient Americas. The Sun Dagger site at Fajada Butte in Choco Canyon, New Mexico, is a brilliant example of an ancient astronomical instrument. There, a precise interplay of sunlight and carved stone spirals marks the solstices and equinoxes with a needle-sharp beam of light. While the technology at Yonaguni would have been far more rudimentary, the underlying principle is the same, using the immutable cycles of the sun to mark time, guide rituals, and embed the cosmos into the very landscape. Similarly, many Maya pyramids, such as the Castillo at Chichen Itza, were designed so that during the equinoxes, the interplay of light and shadow creates the illusion of a serpent slithering down the staircase, a breathtaking fusion of architecture, astronomy, and mythology. If Yonaguni is man-made, it would stand as a potentially much older precursor to this global tradition, a testament to a universal human drive to find meaning and order in the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. However, the astronomical theory faces its own set of naturalistic challenges. Geologists caution that the apparent alignments could be another case of our pattern-seeking minds at work. In any large, complex rock formation with multiple angles and surfaces, it is statistically likely that some features will, purely by chance, align with cardinal directions or solar positions. Without clear, unambiguous markers like a carved groove intended to catch a specific ray of light, or an inscription referencing a celestial event, it is difficult to prove intentionality. The sundial rock could simply be a fallen block that fractured along its natural joints, and its current position might be the result of a seismic slip rather than careful placement by an ancient architect. The burden of proof remains high, requiring researchers to demonstrate that these alignments are not just coincidental, but are so precise and integrated into the site's design that they could not have occurred naturally. This ongoing investigation into the skies above Yonaguni adds yet another captivating layer to its mystery, forcing us to ask whether its builders were not just master stonemasons, but also the world's first astronomers reading their destiny in the stars from a sanctuary now lost to the sea. The very ground beneath Yonaguni holds a key to this mystery, a story of immense planetary power that offers a comprehensive explanation for everything we see. This remote island doesn't simply exist in a seismically active zone. It sits directly atop one of the most geologically violent boundaries on Earth. Yonaguni is positioned on the western edge of the Ryukyu Trench, a deep gash in the ocean floor where the massive Philippine sea plate is relentlessly diving beneath the Eurasian continental plate. This ongoing colossal collision is not a gentle process. It's a slow-motion, grinding impact that generates immense pressure, building up over decades until it's released in a violent shudder, a major earthquake. This region is no stranger to such events, experiencing frequent, powerful tremors that fundamentally reshape the landscape both above and below the waves. To understand the Yonaguni Monument through a geological lens is to recognize that we are not looking at a static relic, but at a dynamic formation still being actively sculpted by the awesome forces of plate tectonics. When one of these powerful seismic events occurs, the energy radiates through the bedrock, and the relatively soft sandstone of Yonaguni responds in a predictable, dramatic way. It fractures. These aren't random, haphazard cracks. The rock possesses natural planes of weakness, and the shock waves from an earthquake propagate through the stone, exploiting these weaknesses to create clean, straight fractures known as joints. This process on a massive scale is what carves the initial blueprint for the entire monument. The seemingly perfect 90-degree angles and long, straight lines that so captivate us are, in this view, simply the exposed faces of these giant, naturally defined blocks. The earthquake doesn't create the joints from nothing. It systematically unlocks the geometric patterns already latent within the stone, revealing the hidden architecture of the bedrock itself. Over millennia, not just one, but hundreds of seismic events would have further refined this natural grid, sharpening the fractures and defining the blocks with ever greater clarity. This leads to the powerful and elegant concept of differential erosion, where nature's patient artistry takes over. Once the earthquakes have established this intricate network of joints, other forces go to work. The powerful Kuroshio current, a relentless river within the sea, constantly surges past the island, carrying with it a swirling, abrasive slurry of sand, pebbles, and silt. This mixture acts as a natural sandblaster on an epic scale, constantly scouring the rock faces, crucially, this erosion is not uniform. The abrasive action is far more effective on the exposed faces of the joints and on the softer, more porous layers of sandstone. The ocean, guided by the fractures created by tectonics, selectively wears away the weakest material. The result is a process of subtraction, not addition. The flat terraces are the harder, more resistant horizontal layers that have been left behind as the softer material around and between them was stripped away. The vertical walls are the sheer faces of the massive blocks, cleaned and smoothed by the current. What looks like a constructed staircase is, in this model, simply a sequence of these durable layers, their edges sharpened as the ocean meticulously excavated the weaker rock along the vertical joints between them. This tectonic narrative also provides the most plausible explanation for the most significant fact of all, the monument's location beneath the sea. The same titanic forces that fractured the rock are also responsible for submerging it. In a subduction zone like the one at the Ryukyu Trench, the process is incredibly complex. As one plate grinds beneath another, it doesn't just cause earthquakes. It can also cause large sections of the overriding plate to warp, tilt, and sink in a process known as tectonic subsidence. A single massive seismic event, or a long series of them, could have caused this section of the Yonaguni coastline to suddenly drop by several meters, or to tilt gradually over centuries, allowing the sea to claim it. This eliminates the need for the dramatic sea level rise timeline required by the man-made theory. The monument could have been shaped by earthquakes and erosion when it was a coastal cliff face, and then later submerged by a significant tectonic displacement, a common geological fate for land in such a volatile part of the world. This single, continuous geological story, from the initial fracturing by earthquakes to the detailed sculpting by ocean currents, and the final act of tectonic subsidence, presents a powerful, unified theory that requires no unknown civilizations, only the well-documented, awe-inspiring power of our dynamic planet. To truly appreciate the power at work here, we need to understand the liquid sculptor that is the Kuroshio Current. This isn't a gentle stream, it's a massive oceanic river, one of the strongest in the world, flowing like a marine conveyor belt past the shores of Yonaguni. Day in and day out for thousands upon thousands of years, this immense current has funneled vast volumes of water through the channels around the monument. And this water is far from empty. It carries a dense, swirling payload of sand, silt, and small gravel particles suspended in its flow. When this abrasive slurry is forced against the relatively soft sandstone at high speeds, it acts like a relentless, natural sandblaster on a monumental scale. This process, known as current scour, is the primary artisan shaping the underwater landscape. It doesn't carve randomly. It works with precision, seeking out the weakest points in the rock. The microscopic pores, the softer sedimentary layers, and especially the pre-existing fractures and joints created by tectonic activity. Over centuries, this persistent abrasion can wear down entire sections of rock, while leaving more resistant areas standing proud, effectively carving out the flat terraces and sharp, vertical drops that define the site's most striking features. The current doesn't just create shapes, it refines them, constantly polishing surfaces and sharpening edges that would otherwise be rounded and softened by a less dynamic environment. Adding another layer to this natural workshop is the quiet, ceaseless activity of the sea's smallest inhabitants. This is the world of bioerosion, a process where living organisms actively wear away the stone. The rock surfaces at Yonaguni are not barren. They are a thriving metropolis for a host of marine life that uses the stone for food and shelter. Sea urchins, for instance, are master excavators. They use their hard, five-toothed mouthparts, a structure called Aristotle's lantern, to scrape algae off the rock surface. In doing so, they inadvertently grind away tiny grooves and pits. When thousands of urchins occupy a single area over generations, their collective scraping can significantly deepen depressions and undercut rock faces. Similarly, chitons, which are mollusks armored with overlapping plates, graze the rocks with a rasping, ribbon-like tongue covered in microscopic magnetite-tipped teeth. This powerful radula allows them to scrape off their food, but it also leaves behind a distinct pattern of fine, parallel scratches on the stone, marks that can easily be mistaken for the deliberate striations of a tool. The bioerosive team includes other specialists as well. Date mussels and certain species of sponges are borers. They don't just scratch the surface, they tunnel directly into the softer sandstone to create protective homes. The mussels use a combination of chemical secretions and mechanical rocking to bore their way in, while sponges secrete acids that slowly dissolve the mineral cement holding the sand grains together. Over decades, the combined efforts of these borers can honeycomb a rock with cavities, weakening its overall structure. When a storm surge or powerful current hits this pre-weakened stone, large sections can break off along the lines dictated by this biological pitting, creating fresh, sharp fractures that the currents then begin to smooth and shape. This partnership between the immense physical force of the water and the slow, persistent chemical and mechanical work of countless organisms creates a feedback loop of erosion. The currents expose fresh rock surfaces for new colonies of organisms to colonize, and their boring and scraping, in turn, makes the rock more susceptible to the next round of current-driven sculpting. It is this symbiotic, relentless partnership that has, over millennia, produced the unnaturally clean lines and geometric forms we find so compelling, demonstrating that nature possesses its own sophisticated toolkit for creating what our eyes so readily interpret as the work of human hands. Beyond the rigorous, evidence-based debate between geologists and archaeologists lies a realm of speculation that captures the imagination in an entirely different way. Here, the Yonaguni Monument transforms from a geological puzzle into a potential keystone of a lost world, a tangible relic of legendary continents swallowed by the sea. The most famous of these is the fabled continent of Mu, a Pacific counterpart to the Atlantic's Atlantis. First proposed in the 19th century by writers like Augustus Le Plongeon and popularized by James Churchward in the 1920s, Mu was described as a vast, idyllic civilization that spanned much of the Pacific Ocean, its people possessing advanced technology and spiritual wisdom before a cataclysmic earthquake sent their entire continent to the bottom of the sea. In this narrative, the Yonaguni Monument becomes a surviving outpost, a temple complex on the periphery of this lost empire, its terraces and staircases echoing the grand architecture of the motherland. Similarly, the concept of Lemuria, a hypothetical land bridge once proposed by scientists to explain the distribution of lemurs between India and Madagascar, was adopted by occult and theosophical traditions as the home of a root race of spiritually advanced beings. For those drawn to these ideas, Yonaguni serves as powerful, physical proof that these were not mere myths, but distorted memories of a real, prehistoric world. The appeal of these grand narratives is deeply psychological. They tap into a universal human fascination with golden ages and fallen empires, stories that suggest we are not the pinnacle of human achievement, but merely the latest chapter in a cyclical history of rise and fall. The idea of a sophisticated, pan-Pacific culture like Mu provides an elegant, unifying explanation for the perplexing architectural similarities we see in ancient sites from Japan to Peru. Instead of disparate cultures independently inventing the pyramid, the theory posits a single, shared source, a mother culture whose maritime explorers spread their knowledge and traditions across the ocean before their own homeland vanished. This solves the puzzle of transoceanic contact in a single, dramatic sweep. For many, this is a far more compelling and romantic story than the slow, isolated grind of cultural evolution. It suggests that our ancestors were not primitive hunter-gatherers, but globe-trotting master builders whose true history was almost entirely erased by a planetary catastrophe, leaving behind only enigmatic ruins like Yonaguni as cryptic clues to their existence. A more grounded, yet still revolutionary, alternative theory places the monument's construction squarely within the known history of Japan, but attributes it to a previously unrecognized level of sophistication within the Jomon culture. The Jomon period, which spanned from roughly 14,000 to 300 years before the Common Era, is traditionally defined by its beautiful chord-pattern pottery, making it one of the world's oldest ceramic traditions. The conventional image of the Jomon people is that of a complex hunter-gatherer society, living in semi-sedentary villages, skilled in fishing, hunting, and gathering, but not known for large-scale, monumental architecture. This is precisely why the Yonaguni Monument is so disruptive to the standard timeline. If the Jomon built it, our entire understanding of their capabilities would need a complete overhaul. Proponents of this theory argue that we have severely underestimated the Jomon. Archaeological evidence from mainland Japan reveals they lived in stable communities for thousands of years, engaged in long-distance trade for materials like obsidian, and created sophisticated lacquerware and intricate clay figurines suggesting a rich spiritual life. Their settlements were not temporary camps, but established villages that persisted for centuries. Given their profound connection to the sea and evidence of seafaring along the Japanese archipelago, it is not a huge leap to suggest that some Jomon groups, particularly those on remote islands like Yonaguni, could have developed advanced stoneworking skills. The motivation for such a massive project could have been deeply intertwined with their spiritual beliefs, which appear to have been animistic and centered around natural forces and astronomical events. The monument, in this view, could have been the ultimate expression of their cosmology, a man-made sacred mountain aligned with the sun and stars, a permanent, indestructible center for their world, constructed to ensure harmony with the spirits of nature. This theory also offers a plausible explanation for the lack of traditional archaeological evidence, like pottery or tools, at the site itself. If the monument was primarily a ceremonial center, its stone terraces and plazas may have been kept ritually clean, free of the everyday debris that fills domestic sites. Furthermore, if the structure was submerged not by the slow creep of sea level rise, but by a sudden, catastrophic tectonic event, a very real possibility in this earthquake-prone region, the powerful resulting tsunamis and landslides could have scoured the site clean, sweeping any smaller artifacts out into the deep ocean or burying them under layers of sediment. The absence of evidence in this case is not necessarily evidence of absence. It could simply be the result of a violent and transformative geological process that reset the archaeological clock, preserving only the largest, most massive stone structures while wiping away all other traces of the people who built them. This Jomon hypothesis forces us to look at a well-known culture with fresh eyes, to consider the possibility that their artistic and spiritual sophistication extended into the realm of megalithic engineering, creating a legacy that only survives where the land succumbed to the sea. The quest to unravel the secrets of the Yonaguni Monument has been supercharged in recent decades by a technological revolution, shifting the investigation from the realm of adventurous diving into a sophisticated digital analysis. Modern explorers no longer rely solely on hand-drawn sketches and memory. They now descend with a full arsenal of high-tech tools that bring unprecedented clarity to the shadowy depths. Technical rebreather systems allow divers to stay submerged for hours, not minutes, drastically increasing the time available for meticulous on-site inspection without the noisy exhaust of bubbles obscuring visibility. High-definition underwater cameras, often mounted on remote-operated vehicles or stabilized by professional film crews, capture the structures in stunning, cinema-quality detail. These crystal-clear images and videos have been instrumental in bringing the monument to a global audience, allowing millions to scrutinize the sharp angles and peculiar formations for themselves. Yet, the most significant breakthroughs have come from technologies that see the site not as a collection of individual features, but as a single, coherent whole mapped with the precision of a satellite image. The game changer in this underwater detective story has been the advent of advanced sonar mapping. Using multi-beam echo sounders and sophisticated 3D bathymetry, research vessels can now paint a comprehensive digital portrait of the entire seabed. This process involves sending out fan-shaped pulses of sound that bounce off the ocean floor, with the returning data meticulously assembled by computers to create a high-resolution, three-dimensional model of the monument and its surroundings. The resulting maps are breathtaking. Suddenly, the entire complex can be viewed from any angle, rotated, and measured with centimeter-level accuracy, all from the comfort of a laboratory. This macro-level perspective reveals relationships between features that were impossible to grasp from a diver's eye view. The precise alignment of the main terrace with the so-called loop road, the full extent of the trench surrounding the base, and the true integration of the monument with the adjacent bedrock become irrefutably clear in this digital landscape. For geologists like Robert Schock, this technology powerfully reinforces the argument for a natural origin, as the 3D models vividly illustrate how the monument's features flow seamlessly from the surrounding rock formations, showing it is not an isolated construction but an integral part of the local geology. For those advocating a man-made origin, however, the same technology provides a treasure trove of new evidence. High-resolution scans can highlight the astonishing regularity of the step terraces and the consistent angles of the main staircase in a way that simple photography cannot. They allow for precise measurements that demonstrate the repetitive dimensions of the steps, a key point in the argument against random erosion. Furthermore, submersibles and remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, have enabled exploration of deeper, more treacherous areas around the monument that are too dangerous for human divers. These robotic explorers, equipped with powerful lights and manipulator arms, have ventured into crevices and along sheer cliff faces, gathering video footage and samples from previously inaccessible locations. Proponents of the artificial theory hope these forays might finally uncover the elusive smoking gun, a sealed chamber containing artifacts, or a clearly carved inscription that would settle the debate once and for all. While such a definitive discovery remains elusive, the sheer volume of high-fidelity data has enriched the discussion, allowing both sides to refine their arguments with a level of detail that was pure science fiction just a generation ago. This flood of new data has also spurred innovation in digital analysis. Using the detailed 3D models, researchers can now run sophisticated simulations to test their hypotheses. Geologists can model thousands of years of tidal currents and erosion patterns to see if the forces of nature could, in fact, produce the monument's sharpest features. Conversely, archaeologists can use the same digital canvas to analyze the site's layout for potential astronomical alignments or principles of sacred geometry with a precision never before possible. The technology acts as a great equalizer, providing a common, objective dataset that both sides must contend with. It hasn't delivered a final verdict, but it has elevated the entire conversation, moving it beyond anecdotal observations and into the realm of quantifiable, evidence-based science. The mystery of Yonaguni is no longer just about what a diver can see with their own eyes. It's about what powerful computers can reveal about the hidden patterns and relationships encoded in the stone, bringing us closer than ever to understanding the true story of this enigmatic underwater world. This remarkable undersea mystery has done far more than just captivate scientists and historians. It has fundamentally reshaped the life and identity of the small, remote island of Yonaguni itself. Before the monument's discovery, Yonaguni was a quiet, rugged outpost known primarily to a handful of fishermen and those seeking the solitude of Japan's western frontier. Its economy was modest, rooted in agriculture and traditional crafts, with its stunning underwater world appreciated by only a small community of dedicated divers. The chance encounter by Kihachiro Aratake in the 1980s changed everything. Almost overnight, the island found itself thrust into the international spotlight, transformed from a sleepy island community into a world-renowned destination for what many now call the ultimate dive. The monument didn't just give the island a new tourist attraction, it gave it a global purpose, a unique selling point that no other place on Earth could claim. The economic impact on this small community has been profound and life-sustaining. A thriving industry of dive shops, tour operators, and guide services has sprung up, creating jobs and opportunities that keep younger generations on the island. Hotels and family-run guest houses now cater to the steady stream of international visitors who arrive with one primary goal: to see the enigmatic structure for themselves. Local restaurants serve divers fresh, local cuisine, and the entire infrastructure of the island has been gently elevated to support this new, knowledge-based tourism. For many locals, the monument is not just a rock formation, it is a cornerstone of their livelihood. It provides a stable economic foundation in a place where options were once limited, allowing the community to prosper while maintaining its traditional character and close-knit social fabric. This isn't mass tourism, it's a specialized, respectful form of travel that attracts curious, thoughtful people from across the globe, all drawn by the allure of a shared human mystery. Local perspectives on the monument are beautifully complex, weaving together modern scientific debate with deep-seated cultural memory and legend. While scientists passionately argue over geology versus archaeology, many islanders hold a more integrated view. Some of the older residents speak of local folklore that tells of a great city that sank beneath the waves in a time of ancient cataclysm, stories passed down through generations that now feel eerily prescient. For them, the scientific controversy simply provides a new vocabulary for an old understanding, that their home has always been a place of power and mystery, a borderland between the everyday world and something far older and more profound. This blending of science and lore creates a unique cultural atmosphere on Yonaguni. You can sit in a local cafe and hear a university-trained dive guide explain the latest sonar mapping data, while an elder might quietly refer to the monument using a name from a centuries-old story. The two narratives don't necessarily conflict. Instead, they coexist, enriching the island's identity with layers of meaning. This fusion is physically embodied in the island's annual events and community life. The mystery of the monument has become a source of local pride and a unifying point for the community. It features prominently in local festivals and school projects, a point of shared identity that connects the island to the wider world. The divers who come are not treated as mere customers, but as fellow investigators in a grand, ongoing adventure. The island has fully embraced its role as the guardian of this secret, with a deep sense of responsibility for both protecting the site and sharing its wonder with those who make the journey. The Yonaguni Monument is no longer just an underwater site. It has become the island's story, a narrative of discovery, resilience, and wonder that is now inextricably woven into the cultural DNA of this remarkable place, ensuring that its mystery will be cherished and protected for generations to come. Despite the compelling visual arguments and the passionate advocacy of researchers like Professor Kimura, the broader field of mainstream archaeology has, for the most part, not embraced the theory of a lost civilization at Yonaguni. This skepticism isn't born from a lack of imagination or a desire to dismiss intriguing possibilities, but from a deeply ingrained methodological discipline that demands a very specific type of evidence before rewriting human history. At its core, archaeology is a forensic science of the human past, and its conclusions must be built on a foundation of verifiable, contextual data. For a site to be universally accepted as man-made, it must present more than just suggestive shapes. It must present the full, undeniable fingerprint of human activity. The first and most significant hurdle for the Yonaguni Monument is the complete and perplexing absence of what archaeologists call cultural artifacts. At any other accepted ancient site worldwide, from the pyramids of Giza to a simple prehistoric camp, the ground is rich with the debris of daily life. This includes fragments of pottery, stone tools like arrowheads or scrapers, remnants of hearths with charcoal, food waste like animal bones or shells, and evidence of burial practices. These artifacts are the true storytellers. They reveal not just that people were present, but how they lived, what they ate, what they believed, and how their technology evolved over time. At Yonaguni, despite decades of searching, no such assemblage has been found. There are no piles of pottery shards, no scattered stone flakes from tool making, no post holes for structures, and no midden heaps of discarded shells. The site is, from an archaeological perspective, eerily sterile. Proponents argue that any such artifacts could have been swept away by powerful currents or buried under centuries of sediment. But skeptics counter that the sheer scale of a construction project capable of creating the monument would have left behind a massive and nearly indelible scatter of cultural material, some of which should have been discovered by now. This leads to the second major point of contention: the established criteria for identifying human construction versus natural formation. Archaeologists have a well-honed toolkit for distinguishing a worked stone from one shaped by nature. They look for unambiguous tool marks such as consistent chisel grooves, drill holes, or the distinct conchoidal fracturing patterns created by deliberate strikes. They search for evidence of quarrying, transportation, and assembly signs that stones were extracted from one location, moved and fitted together in a way that defies their natural bedding planes. At Yonaguni, the evidence remains frustratingly ambiguous. The parallel lines cited as tool marks can be explained by the natural grain of the sandstone or the scour of current-driven sand. The blocks that appear quarried align perfectly with the natural jointing system of the rock, showing no clear signs of being pried loose with tools. The entire structure emerges from the living bedrock rather than being assembled upon it. Without this clear, microscopic and macroscopic evidence of human modification, the geological explanation remains a powerful and simpler alternative. This preference for the simpler explanation is a foundational principle of scientific reasoning known as Occam's razor. When presented with multiple hypotheses to explain a phenomenon, the one that makes the fewest new assumptions is generally favored. In the case of Yonaguni, the two competing hypotheses present vastly different levels of complexity. The natural origin theory relies solely on known, observable, and well-documented processes: the jointing of sandstone, the abrasive power of ocean currents, and the effects of seismic activity. It doesn't require us to invent a previously unknown, advanced civilization or to rewrite the timeline of human technological development. The man-made theory, by contrast, requires a cascade of new assumptions: that a sophisticated culture existed in this region thousands of years before any other known complex society, that it possessed advanced stone-working skills, that it built this monumental structure, and that it vanished without leaving any other significant trace on the adjacent islands or mainland. For mainstream archaeology, the geological model provides a robust and parsimonious explanation that fits within the established framework of earth sciences, while the artificial theory opens a Pandora's box of historical and anthropological questions for which there is currently no supporting evidence beyond the site itself. Ultimately, the debate over Yonaguni is a profound lesson in the scientific process itself. It is a clash between the compelling power of human intuition, our innate ability to see patterns, faces, and intention in the world around us, and the rigorous, often slow-moving demands of empirical proof. Our brains are wired for pattern recognition, a trait that has been essential for human survival, but this same trait can lead us to see design where none exists, a phenomenon known as pareidolia. The magnificent, terraced forms of Yonaguni tap directly into this instinct, creating an almost irresistible impression of a built environment. Science, however, must resist this initial allure and demand more. It requires that we question what we see, that we actively seek out evidence that could disprove our theories, and that we adhere to a strict standard of proof before making extraordinary claims. The mainstream archaeological stance is not a dismissal of wonder, but a disciplined commitment to this process. It leaves the door open for future discovery. Perhaps a future dive or a new technology will finally uncover that single, undeniable artifact. But until that day comes, the official story of human history will remain one of gradual, documented development, and the Yonaguni Monument will continue to stand as one of the world's most spectacular and persuasive natural wonders. And this profound question doesn't exist in a vacuum. The debate surrounding the Yonaguni Monument is part of a much larger global conversation, one that echoes in the warm, shallow waters of the Caribbean and murmurs from other sunken coastlines of Japan. Just a few thousand miles away, off the coast of North Bimini in the Bahamas, lies another enduring enigma known as the Bimini Road. Discovered in 1968, this formation consists of a long, straight row of massive, rectangular limestone blocks laid out in a deliberate-looking path on the seabed. The blocks are strikingly uniform, appearing to form a paved roadway or perhaps the foundation of a massive wall that has since collapsed. For proponents of lost civilizations, the Bimini Road was immediately hailed as a clear remnant of the fabled Atlantis, a tangible piece of the continent described by Plato. The visual impact is undeniable. It looks constructed, with its neat alignment and seemingly fitted stones creating a powerful impression of human engineering beneath the waves. Yet, just as with Yonaguni, geologists offer a compelling natural explanation. They identify the blocks as a classic example of beak rock, a type of limestone that forms in horizontal layers in the intertidal zone. Over time, these layers can fracture along natural joints, and as sea levels rise or the land subsides, the entire formation can sink and break apart, with the pieces settling into a deceptively orderly arrangement that mimics a man-made pavement. The debate between a constructed quay and a natural fracture pattern is a near-perfect parallel to the core conflict at Yonaguni, demonstrating how the same fundamental clash of interpretation repeats itself across the world's oceans. Venture a little deeper into the Caribbean, and the mystery only intensifies. Off the western tip of Cuba, in the deep waters of the Yucatan Channel, sonar operators in 2001 detected a series of astonishing formations resting on a plateau nearly 700 meters below the surface. The images that emerged were staggering. They appeared to show vast geometric structures, including what looked like pyramids, concentric circles, and massive, smooth blocks arranged in urban-like grids. The scale was monumental, suggesting the possibility of an entire submerged city, a discovery that, if proven artificial, would dwarf almost every known archaeological site in the Americas. The immediate and obvious challenge was the depth. At over 2,000 feet, these structures dated to a time when sea levels were dramatically lower, pushing their potential construction date back to a remote antiquity that challenges conventional human timelines. The initial excitement was met with the same rigorous skepticism. Geologists pointed out that the sonar images, while compelling, could be interpreted as unusual but natural geological formations, such as fractured granite bedrock or the result of ancient sand dune systems that were petrified and then submerged. The immense pressure and the technical difficulty of conducting detailed archaeological work at such depths have left the Cuban underwater formations in a state of tantalizing limbo, much like Yonaguni, a breathtaking possibility that hangs in the balance, awaiting the definitive evidence that has so far remained just out of reach. Turning our gaze back to Japan, we find that Yonaguni is not even the only site of its kind in the region. Scattered throughout the Ryukyu archipelago, particularly in the waters around the main island of Okinawa, divers and researchers have identified a number of other submerged stone formations that spark similar debate. Sites like the pyramid off the coast of Chatham or the intriguing structures near Yonaguni Island often feature what appear to be carved steps, tunnel-like openings, and platforms with sharp angles. These sites share a common geological foundation with Yonaguni, being composed of the same sandstone and subject to the same powerful tectonic forces and ocean currents. For those who believe in a widespread ancient building culture, these Okinawan sites are not isolated anomalies but part of a larger network, potentially the remnants of a single, coherent civilization that populated this island chain when it was a continuous stretch of dry land. This theory suggests we are not looking at one lost city, but at the drowned landscape of an entire culture, with Yonaguni as its most spectacular and well-preserved capital. The counter-argument, of course, is that this shared geology naturally produces shared formations. The same processes of jointing and erosion that created Yonaguni would logically create similar-looking structures throughout the region, making it a case of widespread geological mimicry rather than a connected archaeological complex. When we step back and view these sites collectively, from the Bimini Road to the Cuban deep water formations to the Okinawan structures, a fascinating pattern emerges in the debates they ignite. Each one becomes a Rorschach test where we project our own beliefs, hopes, and understandings of human history onto the ambiguous canvas of the natural world. They all force a confrontation between two fundamentally different ways of seeing. One that interprets unusual geometry as a sure sign of intelligent design, and another that seeks to explain that same geometry through the complex, often counterintuitive processes of the Earth. These sites also highlight a consistent evidential challenge. In nearly every case, the evidence is compelling but ultimately circumstantial. We have the grand forms, the suggestive shapes, and the captivating alignments, but the conclusive, undeniable proof, the crafted artifact in situ, the unambiguous inscription, the clearly man-made tool mark in an indisputable context remains elusive. This shared evidentiary gap is what keeps these mysteries alive and passionately contested for decades. What these global parallels might collectively suggest about submerged human history is perhaps the most profound question of all. One possibility is that we are seeing the fragmented, underwater footprints of a human past that is far more complex and far older than our textbooks allow. The recurring motif of submerged, stepped platforms and what look like monumental foundations could point to a common architectural tradition that flourished on the continental shelves when they were exposed, fertile coastal plains. As the Ice Age ended and the seas rose, these early coastal societies would have been the first and most thoroughly inundated, their entire cultural heartlands erased from the map and from memory. In this view, sites like Yonaguni and Bimini are not random outliers, but rare, surviving glimpses of a lost chapter, a world of prehistory that was literally swallowed by the ocean, leaving behind only the most durable stone structures as cryptic clues to their existence. This narrative transforms our understanding of human progress, suggesting that the drive for monumental construction and complex social organization may have emerged multiple times in our deep past, only to be reset by global climatic catastrophe. The alternative, and perhaps more humbling, perspective is that these sites are a powerful testament to the boundless creativity of natural geology and the enduring power of human pareidolia. Our minds are engineered to find patterns and impose narrative, and there are few more blank and suggestive slates than the mysterious ocean floor. The collective global phenomenon of underwater mysteries could be showing us that, given a sufficiently large and complex rock formation in an evocative setting, humans will almost inevitably see the ghosts of cities and the fingerprints of lost civilizations. This doesn't diminish their wonder. In fact, it enhances it. It means that our planet is capable of producing sculptures of such breathtaking scale and precision that they can fool us into believing they are our own. Whether as artifacts of a forgotten world or as masterpieces of planetary art, these sunken structures serve a vital purpose. They pull us into the depths both of the ocean and of our own curiosity, compelling us to look closer, question harder, and forever wonder what secrets the sea still holds. The story of the Yonaguni Monument, however, has not been shaped solely by scientific journals or academic conferences. It has been catapulted into the global consciousness primarily through the powerful lens of media and popular culture, which has a distinct appetite for mystery and a proven track record for transforming complex debates into compelling and often simplified narratives. From the moment the first dramatic underwater footage was broadcast, the monument was framed not just as a geological curiosity, but as a potential gateway to a forgotten world. Television documentaries, with their need for engaging story arcs and stunning visuals, have overwhelmingly gravitated toward the lost city hypothesis. The formula is irresistible: haunting music, slow-motion footage of divers gliding past massive stone terraces, and narration filled with words like enigma, controversy, and ancient secret. These productions often feature Professor Kimura and other proponents prominently, presenting their theories with compelling visuals, while the geological counterarguments from figures like Professor Skok are sometimes included as a brief, almost obligatory counterpoint. A necessary skepticism before the program returns to the more thrilling possibility of a sunken civilization. This editorial choice shapes public perception profoundly, planting the image of a drowned Japanese Atlantis firmly in the minds of millions. This sensational framing extends far beyond television into the vast ecosystem of books, magazines, and online content. A quick search on the internet reveals a digital landscape saturated with articles and videos bearing titles like "Japan's Atlantis," "The Truth They Don't Want You to See," or "Proof of a Lost Pacific Civilization." In these spaces, the nuance of the scientific debate often evaporates, replaced by a certainty that the mainstream archaeological community is unwilling to accept a revolutionary truth. Online forums and social media platforms become echo chambers where the most speculative theories can flourish, sometimes blending the Yonaguni facts with myths of Mu, Lemuria, and even ancient astronauts. The algorithm-driven nature of online content rewards engagement, and nothing generates clicks and comments quite like a mystery that challenges established history. This creates a feedback loop where the most extreme and sensational interpretations receive the most visibility, while measured, geological explanations can seem comparatively dry and less shareable, struggling to compete in the attention economy. This media dynamic places a significant responsibility on content creators to present balanced views, a responsibility that is not always shouldered with care. When documentaries and online influencers present only the most exciting side of the argument without adequately explaining the strength of the naturalistic explanations, they do a disservice to the public's understanding of both science and the site itself. The process of geological inquiry, the patient study of rock fracturing, tidal patterns, and seismic history, is often less cinematic than the quest for a lost city, leading to its underrepresentation. This imbalance can create a false perception that the scientific community is stubbornly ignoring obvious evidence, when in reality, that community is adhering to a rigorous, evidence-based methodology that requires more than compelling shapes to rewrite human history. The consequence is a growing gap between popular belief and scientific consensus, where the monument becomes more of a mythological symbol than a subject of genuine scientific intrigue. Yet, it would be unfair to cast this media coverage solely in a negative light. The very same sensationalism that oversimplifies the debate has also been directly responsible for driving both scientific interest and tourist fascination to unprecedented levels. The global broadcast of those first documentaries in the 1990s and early 2000s did not just captivate the public. They caught the attention of researchers and funding bodies who might otherwise have never heard of this remote underwater formation. The public's fascination created a palpable demand for answers, which in turn helped justify further scientific expeditions and the application of new technologies like advanced sonar mapping and ROV exploration to the site. In a very real sense, the media's lost city narrative generated the funds and the momentum that have allowed for the more detailed, less sensational scientific investigations we see today. The mystery became a catalyst for genuine research, proving that public curiosity can be a powerful engine for scientific progress, even when that curiosity is sparked by a somewhat romanticized version of events. This surge in popular awareness has had a transformative economic and cultural impact on Yonaguni Island itself. The media's portrayal of the monument as a must-see enigma created a new genre of tourism, mystery tourism. Divers who might have been content watching hammerhead sharks now book trips with the primary goal of swimming through the monument's arches and hovering over its grand staircase, hoping to feel the awe of a potential ancient discovery for themselves. Local dive shops and tour operators have become de facto ambassadors, often presenting both the geological and archaeological theories to their clients, allowing visitors to weigh the evidence with their own eyes. The island has learned to leverage its unique position, hosting conferences and welcoming film crews, all of which inject vital revenue into the local economy. The monument, as presented through the media, has given this small community a global profile and a sustainable future, intertwining its destiny with the ongoing unraveling of the mystery. Ultimately, the story of Yonaguni in popular culture serves as a powerful case study in how modern media shapes our relationship with the ancient past. It demonstrates our deep-seated human yearning for lost worlds and grand narratives, a desire that often outweighs our patience for complex, incremental science. The monument becomes a screen onto which we project our fantasies about human origins, our fears of cataclysm, and our hopes of uncovering a past more magnificent than we had ever imagined. This doesn't make the public's fascination naive, it makes it profoundly human. The role of responsible media, then, is not to dismiss this fascination but to channel it. The most impactful documentaries, books, and articles are those that harness the undeniable allure of the lost city idea to draw the audience in, but then take them on a deeper journey, exploring the full spectrum of evidence with intellectual honesty. They can celebrate the wonder of the site while simultaneously celebrating the wonder of natural geological processes, showing that the truth, whether it is written by human hands or by the relentless forces of the earth, is astonishing in its own right. The ongoing conversation about Yonaguni is a dialogue between what we feel in our hearts when we see those stones and what we can prove with our minds, a dialogue that the media has the power to either enrich with nuance or simplify into a mere headline. So where does the investigation stand today? In recent years, the pace of discovery has not slowed, but the nature of the inquiry has matured, moving from broad speculation to highly targeted scientific analysis. One of the most significant developments has been the increasing involvement of mainstream academic institutions from around the world, conducting joint expeditions with Japanese researchers. These aren't treasure hunting missions, they are meticulously planned scientific campaigns equipped with the next generation of subsea technology. High-resolution multi-beam sonar mapping has now been conducted over the entire site and its extended periphery, creating digital elevation models of such stunning clarity that researchers can virtually walk through the complex from their desks, measuring angles and volumes with an accuracy previously impossible. These digital models have become the new common ground for debate, providing an objective data set that both geologists and archaeologists must contend with. A key focus of recent fieldwork has been the search for that elusive, definitive artifact. Expeditions have employed sediment cores and suction dredges to carefully sample the seabed around the base of the monument, sifting through millennia of accumulated sand and silt in the hope of finding even a single, unmistakably human-made object, a stone tool, a piece of worked pottery, or a charcoal fragment from an ancient fire. While some expeditions have reported finding what they call stone tools, these finds remain hotly contested. Critics argue the objects are simply geofax rocks naturally fractured by tidal forces or tectonic shifts that coincidentally resemble primitive hand axes or scrapers. The absence of associated lithic scatter, the telltale debris field of stone flakes that surrounds any authentic tool-making site continues to be a major point raised by skeptical archaeologists. The search, therefore, has expanded beyond the monument itself to the surrounding underwater plains, looking for any evidence of habitation or activity that would contextualize the main structure as part of a larger settlement. On the geological front, research has become incredibly sophisticated, moving beyond general observations to detailed modeling of the specific erosional processes at work. Scientists are now using computational fluid dynamics to simulate thousands of years of tidal action around the Yonaguni Formation. These simulations can model how the powerful Kuroshio current, laden with abrasive sand, would swirl around the pre-existing joints and fractures in the sandstone, predicting with remarkable precision how such forces would sculpt the sharp terraces and clean faces we see today. Furthermore, geochemical analysis of the rock surfaces has provided new insights. By studying the rates of bioerosion from mollusks and the patterns of mineral dissolution, researchers can better understand the sequence of erosional events and distinguish between features formed above water and those shaped entirely in the submarine environment. This granular level of analysis strengthens the natural origin argument by demonstrating that the entire site is consistent with a continuous, multi-stage geological history. Despite these advanced efforts, the fundamental debate remains as polarized as ever. The two leading schools of thought have not converged. Instead, they have deepened their respective trenches, each armed with more data than before. On one side, Professor Kimura and his colleagues continue to publish papers pointing to new, specific features they argue are inexplicable by nature. These include a recently highlighted cobblestone pavement area and what they describe as a quarry site with marker stones still in place. For them, the accumulation of these seemingly architectural elements, even in the absence of traditional artifacts, forms an overwhelming circumstantial case for human involvement. On the other side, the geological consensus, championed by figures like Robert Schoch, remains firmly rooted in the power of natural processes. They argue that every new discovery by the man-made camp, upon closer inspection, reveals itself to be a perfect example of known geological phenomena. The cobblestones are explained as a layer of conglomerate rock, where harder, rounded stones are naturally cemented together, now exposed as the softer matrix erodes away. The marker stones are seen as nothing more than isolated, durable blocks left standing as the weaker rock around them was stripped back. The central questions that researchers are still trying to answer have therefore become more refined. The blunt, is it natural or man-made, has evolved into a series of more nuanced inquiries. Can the specific, repetitive geometry of the main staircase be replicated in a laboratory erosion tank using only natural forces? Are there any mineralogical or microscopic signatures on the stone surfaces that are uniquely associated with human tooling and cannot be produced by current scour or bioerosion? And perhaps most critically, if it is natural, why are there not more formations of similar complexity and scale elsewhere in the world with comparable geology and currents? If it is man-made, where is the infrastructure, the roads, the villages, the farmland that would have supported the immense labor force required for such a project? These are the puzzles that continue to drive the science forward, ensuring that the silent stones of Yonaguni will remain a focal point of exploration and debate for years to come, a submerged riddle that challenges the very boundaries between natural wonder and human history. Ultimately, the enduring grip of the Yonaguni Monument on our collective imagination may have less to do with the stones themselves and more to do with something deep within the human psyche. We are, at our core, a species of storytellers, and we are irresistibly drawn to narratives of lost worlds and forgotten golden ages. The idea that our current understanding of history is incomplete, that entire chapters of the human saga lie submerged and waiting to be rediscovered, holds a powerful emotional appeal. It speaks to a longing for a past that was more magnificent, more mysterious, or perhaps more spiritually advanced than our own. A sunken city off the coast of Japan isn't just an archaeological site. It is a symbol of a grander, untold story, a tangible clue that the world is far more wondrous and enigmatic than our textbooks suggest. This emotional pull can be so strong that it often overrides the more cautious, methodical pace of scientific inquiry in the public consciousness. This fascination is deeply intertwined with our innate pattern-seeking behavior, a cognitive trait that has been essential for human survival. For millennia, quickly identifying a potential predator in the bushes or recognizing a familiar face in a crowd meant the difference between life and death. This hardwired tendency, known as pareidolia, causes us to see meaningful shapes in random patterns, a face on the surface of Mars, a dragon in the clouds, or a carved turtle in an underwater rock formation. At a place like Yonaguni, where the geology is exceptionally complex and geometric, our brains work overtime to assemble these shapes into a coherent, human-made narrative. We see a staircase and our mind immediately conjures images of priests and processions. We see a flat terrace and we envision a bustling public square. This isn't a failure of logic, it's the result of a cognitive system that is brilliantly optimized for finding order and intention in a chaotic world, even when that intention isn't actually there. The mystery also thrives on our deep-seated desire for discovery and the allure of the unknown. In an era where satellite imagery has mapped nearly every inch of the globe, the deep ocean remains one of our planet's last true frontiers. It is a vast, dark, and largely unexplored realm that continues to ignite our sense of adventure. The thought that monumental secrets could be hiding just beneath the waves, in waters accessible to recreational divers, is incredibly potent. It transforms each of us into a potential modern-day Indiana Jones, allowing us to believe that grand discoveries are still possible, that we might personally stumble upon something that rewrites everything we thought we knew. This sense of potential, of standing on the precipice of a paradigm-shifting revelation, is a powerful intoxicant, fueling both the tourist economy of Yonaguni Island and the endless online speculation about the site's true origins. Furthermore, the idea of a lost civilization resonates with a profound, almost universal cultural memory of cataclysm. Nearly every ancient culture around the world has its own flood myth, from the story of Noah in the Bible to the epic of Gilgamesh from Mesopotamia and the tales of the Great Deluge in Maya and Aboriginal Australian traditions. These stories speak to a shared, subconscious understanding that the world can change dramatically and catastrophically, wiping away entire societies. The Yonaguni Monument, resting silently on the ocean floor, becomes a physical anchor for these ancient fears and memories. It provides a plausible, tangible location for one of these lost worlds, transforming a universal myth into a specific, investigative mystery. It allows us to point to a map and say, there, that is where it happened, giving a haunting, physical form to our most ancient stories of rise and fall. This emotional and psychological backdrop helps explain why the scientific debate often feels so polarized and passionate. For those who feel a deep, intuitive conviction that the site is man-made, the geological explanations can seem overly clinical, even dismissive, as if they are explaining away the magic. The scientific method, with its demand for reproducible evidence and its adherence to Occam's razor, can feel like it is stripping the site of its wonder and narrative power. Conversely, for scientists, the public's embrace of the lost city theory can be a source of frustration, seen as a triumph of emotion over evidence, of a good story over a verifiable truth. This tension is not unique to Yonaguni. It plays out in discussions about everything from ancient aliens to psychic phenomena. We are caught between our deep-seated need for mystery and meaning and the disciplined, often slow-moving, process of building knowledge through evidence. The stones of Yonaguni do not just challenge our history books, They challenge us to understand the complex interplay between what we feel in our hearts to be true and what we can prove with our minds. And so we arrive at the heart of the matter, standing before a mystery that refuses to be easily solved. On one side of the scales, we have the evidence that ignites the imagination, the unnerving perfection of the main staircase with its uniform steps ascending from the seabed, the colossal terraces and platforms that form a structure dwarfing many ancient pyramids, the clean 90-degree angles and straight lines that appear carved rather than eroded, and the hauntingly specific features like the triangular pool, the encircling loop road, and the iconic turtle-shaped rock. For proponents of a human origin, this is not a random collection of oddities but a coherent, interconnected complex. The sheer orchestration of these elements suggests a master plan, an architectural vision that points toward a ceremonial center, a fortress, or even a full-fledged city, designed by a sophisticated culture with the knowledge and labor force to shape the very landscape. This perspective asks us to consider the profound implications that a civilization capable of such monumental construction thrived here over 10,000 years ago, a timeline that would fundamentally rewrite our understanding of human history and technological progress. On the other side rests the powerful and elegant explanation of natural geology. The entire monument is composed of sandstone, a rock famously susceptible to the patient, relentless artistry of the elements. Geologists point to the dense network of natural joints and fractures that crisscross the bedrock, creating a pre-existing geometric blueprint. The immense power of the Kuroshio current, carrying its abrasive load of sand and silt, has acted as a planetary-scale sandblaster for millennia, selectively eroding the softer rock along these fractures. This process of differential erosion can meticulously carve out flat terraces, sheer vertical walls, and even step-like sequences, all without a single human tool. The grand staircase, in this view, is not built but revealed a series of durable rock layers exposed as the weaker material between them was systematically scoured away by the ocean. This geological narrative doesn't require a lost civilization. It relies solely on the well-documented, awe-inspiring forces of tectonics and hydrology, presenting a unified theory that accounts for every seemingly artificial feature through the magnificent, chaotic creativity of nature. The absence of any undisputed cultural artifacts, pottery, tools, or hearths at the site remains a formidable pillar of this argument, highlighting the rigorous standards of proof that mainstream archaeology rightly demands. Perhaps the most profound lesson of Yonaguni lies not in which answer is correct, but in the very act of questioning itself. This submerged enigma is a powerful reminder of how much we still have to learn about our planet and our own past. It sits at the thrilling frontier between what we know and what we can only wonder about, challenging the boundaries of geology, archaeology, and history. Exploring mysteries of this magnitude pushes the boundaries of our knowledge, forcing us to re-examine long-held assumptions, to develop new technologies for investigation, and to remain humble in the face of the planet's deep, complex history. It is a testament to the enduring power of human curiosity, our innate drive to look at a strange formation and ask, how did this come to be? This quest for understanding, regardless of the final outcome, is a noble and essential human endeavor. Ultimately, the story of the Yonaguni Monument belongs as much to you, the viewer, as it does to the scientists and explorers. You've seen the evidence, heard the competing theories, and felt the pull of its underwater mystery. The investigation is far from over, and your perspective is a valuable part of that ongoing conversation. We encourage you to dive deeper, explore the sonar maps, read the research papers, and watch the documentaries from all sides of the debate. Form your own opinion based on the fascinating and often contradictory evidence. Then we'd love to hear what you think. Do you see the hand of a lost civilization in those precise stone angles? Or do you see the magnificent, unplanned artistry of natural geological forces? Share your verdict in the comments below and let us know whether you believe the Yonaguni Monument is one of the world's greatest natural wonders or a sunken piece of human history waiting for its story to be fully told.